Hi, and welcome to another edition of our People First interview series where we shine a light on great companies that not only do interesting and cool work, but most importantly, look after their people. Identified Global is a market leader in personalized career management and talent acquisition, specializing in the legal tech sector with great candidate experience guaranteed. Check out identifiedglobal.com for more information on the roles we cover and our latest jobs. This week, I'm joined by Malcolm Gray, co-founder of Libryo. Libryo is the world's first and future comprehensive software as a service sustainability governance platform. It is the software and content engine behind the standards and legal platform used by 2,500 users at 160 plants and sites at large and listed companies. Hi, Malcolm. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Where are you in the world?
I'm currently sitting in Cape Town.
Fantastic.
After a long, in my office in Cape Town, which has been the place that I've now been hibernating in for the past 15 months.
Yeah, well, it looks sunnier than it does here at the minute, that's for sure. So yeah, I am very jealous. So Malcolm, obviously I've done a little intro on the business, but this is the People First podcast. So tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you, and what do you do? Because you're involved in quite a few things. You're in investment, legal tech startups, sustainability. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks. I often think of myself as a jack of all trades and master of not very much. But yeah, so I guess I'm first and foremost a father and a husband. I've got three wonderful boys and a wife, and we live in Cape Town. My boys are mostly grown up. My eldest is 30, and I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. So we're kind of at the other end of the spectrum. But I guess I would describe myself as a sustainability guy. Basically, I sort of trained in the sciences. Actually, I've got a Bachelor of Science in geology and hydrology, but ended up pivoting into law and ended up as an environmental lawyer. And that took me on an interesting journey where I actually ended up in finance and spent 16 years working at a company that's now known as 91, but was previously known as Investec,
Right.
where I drove and in a big way actually got very involved in the whole movement from sort of socially responsible investments towards what is now known as ESG. So I'm kind of steeped in sort of investment ESG thinking. And then in about 2016, I came to the conclusion that my work was done. I guess I'm a startup guy at heart. And so I'd done a lot of the early thinking around ESG, developed the processes, launched lots of funds, but it was time to do something different and took a break. And then I met these two kind of wonderful guys, Pete and Garth, my co-founders at Libryo. And they had an environmental consulting business in South Africa. And after a walk and a number of conversations, came to the conclusion that there was something here. And the three of us ended up starting Libryo. And Libryo really was, in my sort of sense, the culmination of, I guess, up until that point, my life's work, which was really bringing sustainability, corporate thinking, and kind of law all together into the same space. So I've been really blessed to be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's that is an interesting journey. I mean, it's not your, I guess, atypical. And have you found any, I guess, have you come up against any restrictions in the legal tech space and the sustainability? Or is it sort of been embraced with open arms?
Sure. I mean, in the early days, it was very much a kind of pushing water uphill process, to be honest. There was a lot of resistance. Obviously, there were people that kind of got the whole sustainability space. They were really kind of embracing of it, but mostly people saw you as a bit of an extreme greenie. And so that kind of like tried to sort of push you into the corner. But I'm quite resilient, so that didn't really stop me. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Like the world has shifted a lot in the last sort of like 5-6 years towards a deeper appreciation of our sort of sustainability challenges. And I think now with the change of government in the US, we're getting a renewed sense of like global momentum. So I'm quite excited actually about the sustainability agenda as a whole. I think the UK has been leading in some of its thinking with the EU, China, but the US under Trump lagged a long time and it made it really difficult. So yeah, excited to see how this gets going.
Yeah, fantastic. So you started your sort of legal journey as an environmental and commercial attorney. I mean, what was the dream back in the day? Was that always, you know, going through, you know, school as a kid? What was the dream?
It's really weird. I had the privilege of actually meeting a law professor yesterday who actually influenced my journey quite a lot. I had a coffee with him, but it really got me reflecting. I just turned 50, so like you think about these things when you get older.
Yeah.
But actually, no, I went to university to become a geologist, or specifically a geophysicist, and I was pretty clear that that's what I wanted to do. And it was actually while studying that I actually stumbled on environmental law. It was a total serendipitous moment. And I think it's like many things in life. Like once you discover the thing that actually is you, it like really resonates like so strongly. And after that, I was clear I wanted to become an environmental lawyer. And so after my BSc, I went on to do a postgraduate degree in law and actually went on to do a master's as well. But never thought I would do anything else. And then whilst practicing law, I suddenly came up against the reality of what practicing law really meant. And the idealist in me was finding that quite challenging. And so my sort of thoughts started drifting more and more towards how I could have influence. I felt the idea of just representing corporates once they got into trouble seemed not to be the right way of solving the world's problems. So I started thinking about how do you influence corporates earlier, and effectively discovered this idea that if you could own shares in a company, you might be able to influence the board agenda. It was very naive thinking back in the late 90s, but essentially early shareholder activism was really kind of what started to emerge for me. And then I got offered this job in an asset manager and saw the opportunity to potentially pursue that. But it took a long time to kind of get onto a path that really saw me achieving my ambition. You know, when you tell the story in retrospect, it looks a lot easier, but there were many moments where I sat there thinking to myself, what am I doing? But I guess the sustainability legal piece has been in my DNA for a long, long time now. So 30 odd years.
Wow. So, I mean, you touched on it a few moments ago, but you know, how was it born? You know, what was where was the light bulb moment? You mentioned those walks and your founding partners. Where did that? Where was the company born from?
So my partners bought a business that had been in existence for quite some time. It was called the Environmental Law Consultancy, and it was started by, in his own way, a visionary guy who kind of saw the need to help corporates understand environmental law. And environmental law through the 80s and 90s was still an emerging area of law. It wasn't well understood. And so he built a business up where he helped corporates. He essentially produced this book of environmental law that people updated every year. So it was really quite forward thinking. And so my one partner, Garth, had done some work for this guy as he was a practicing lawyer as well, Garth. And this guy was retiring, and Garth and his business partners decided to buy the business. And they brought Pete on board. Pete was a technologist. And Pete looked at this and said, look, this is quite smart. We might be able to do something clever in terms of tech. And so that's where the original kind of seed started back in 2011, 12. I only met the guys in 2015, and they'd been running the small consultancy for a number of years. And interesting enough, I did an investment in a geolocation business, which actually ended up failing, but I learned a lot about geolocation and the power of where technology was actually going in terms of the real ability to think of the world through a mapping interface. And so when Pete and Garth and I started chatting, and we got introduced purely serendipitously, one thing just led to another. And in my mind, like things started to coalesce quite quickly. And I said to Pete and Garth, if you genuinely think that you can use geolocation and law together in a way of helping customers know what laws they need to comply with, there's something here. But doing it in South Africa makes no sense at all. You really need to make this a global business.
Yeah.
And so if you're up for that, I'm up for that. And that's how actually Libryo was born. So
Wow.
it was like a long gestation period, I think,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Well, yeah, probably, and by the looks of things, the right thing. Sometimes these great ideas happen overnight, and you only have to look at the European Football Super League to see how quick decisions can fail badly. So, moving on, you know, I know from our conversations that you are very big on culture, and you were an advocate of remote working before it was cool, right, or before it was enforced on everybody. Why is that? Where's that come from? I mean, and what's your driver behind that mentality and perhaps being so open to remote working, before it's now commonstay?
Yeah, I mean, Pete, Garth, and I did a lot of thinking and planning in the process of actually launching Libryo, right down to, and it touches on culture as well, right down to the sort of values that we thought would be important in building a business. And I think we each came to the conclusion around remote working through our own lived experience. But my story around remote working was that I had been effectively a global traveler for about 10, 12 years and running significant amounts of money, like billions of dollars of capital. I could do it anywhere in the world. I was traveling to South America, North America, and Europe, and Asia, and always like presenting and pitching my funds and meeting customers, but at the same time managing my funds. And so to me, it became obvious that like we were moving to an era where location became less and less relevant in terms of the way you worked. And in a world where technology was becoming more of an enabler, we didn't yet have Zoom, but Skype had become really quite penetrated. Like we came to the conclusion that if you want to build a global business, you need to get access to global talent. And if you locked into a single location, your ability to get global talent is difficult. And I guess partly because we were South African in our mindset, like we knew how difficult it was to secure talent in a relatively remote place like South Africa. Maybe when you're based in London, it's a melting pot of a lot of different talent streams that flow towards it. But in the end, people go back to other places, and then you potentially lose your talent if you're very location focused. So yeah, we came to the conclusion that that was like the right way to go. And then the second was actually more of a sustainability issue, which was, people all moving from different places to a single place every day and then back has a massive environmental footprint. And it doesn't really make sense from an environmental perspective. People leave their families and they come into the office, so they have to find either caretakers or nurseries or whatever it is. And we thought like the world's moving to a place where that's not going to be the way it's going to work anymore. And so we took a bold decision, and actually many people told us we were being stupid when we launched the business in 2016 as a remote business.
Yeah.
But we just had a strong conviction that the world was moving in that direction. And as I said, I think it was our lived experiences, and it had a lot to do with the sustainability realities of not moving people everywhere.
With people sort of advising against you, in the early ages of a startup, you want to get things right. I mean, was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, maybe we should take this advice, or was it just, in your head, we're going for it and that's the right thing to do?
The reality was that we had the previous business we had in South Africa was an office-based business. Okay. And so we were a bit of a hybrid in reality. We had an office, and at the time, Garth was already living in London. Pete was still living in South Africa. So we were kind of like quite office-based with the original staff. And so I guess we had the experience of conceptually remote business, i.e. we were going to recruit talent wherever we found it. And our lead developer actually, when we employed him, was actually living in Kenya at the time. So we went through this like phase of like office to hybrid to remote. So it was actually a transition. But we were always like remote in terms of the way, like we always used to say Libryo, like it's pretty much, I think it's on our website as well. Like Libryo is a remote first business, like that. Even in our cultural documents, it starts off by saying Libryo is a remote first business. So yeah, I think we had the benefit of a transition. And when people did push back on us, we just felt strong in our conviction. I mean, our original investors, one of our original investors said to us, it's a really nice idea, but it's kind of played its way out, and lots of people are realizing that remote working doesn't work anymore. So I think you guys might be wrong about this, but let's see what happens. Anyway, I guess we're 2021 and we saw what happened. So
has any of the advice come true, or has it been plain sailing?
No, look, I think practically speaking, like no single way of working is perfect. I mean, remote working isn't perfect either. It does have its challenges. And we do have, in reality, a bit of a hybrid model in a way, because we do try to get people together. We do actually have an office in Cape Town. We've got a co-working space in London. So we do look to bring people together, but COVID in a way has actually convinced even those members of staff internally who, let's call them like reluctant remote workers, they've almost become like the advocates of it now. So
Yeah.
so I wouldn't say that the advice was right or wrong. I think what you learn over time is that there's no such thing as a perfect solution, but you need to then build processes around it that actually make it work for the individuals in question.
Yeah. So, you obviously being geographically spread, global workforce, remote workforce, did COVID impact, the way that you lead your teams and your business or did it impact you in different ways in different, locations around the world?
Yeah, so look, I mean, COVID, everybody's been through a tough time. I think the advantage we had as we came into sort of March, April last year was that our teams were already remote. So that was, and by last year, I think we had team members in about 6 or 7 different countries. So then it wasn't like we were already very remote in terms of the way that we worked. I think what we realized was that COVID remote working isn't what we envisaged as remote working. I mean, we had like maybe a slightly starry-eyed approach to remote working, which is, that's how I worked. Like, go to a coffee shop, work in a coffee shop, go here, go there. So remote working when you're like stuck at home isn't quite as a pleasant experience, particularly when you're a dad or a mom and you've got a young child or a couple of young kids, or you've got schooling that has to happen at home. So that sort of remote working wasn't what we envisaged as remote working. So I think that COVID did put a lot of stress into the system. And weirdly, and I guess we should have realized this, but it had a very interesting productivity impact, because as a result of COVID, like, people are working harder, I think, than before COVID in reality, because it's so much easier to set up a meeting. I'll only be in your city in like 3 months time. We'll meet then. No, let's meet tomorrow. Okay, cool. I'll meet you on Zoom. And so, like, I think everyone's experienced a lot more work volume, and in some cases that's translated into work pressure, I think. And so I think we've been like, we've got this value in our business, which is called taking a margin call, and that we just do believe that we want people to work hard and be productive and not work all hours that God sends, because we think people are rounded individuals and there's more to than just your work life. But COVID, I think, has actually meant that people are working harder and more, and we as a business have been quite busy, and so as a result, with limited resources, more people are doing more at the moment. So that has been a challenge, and we've worked quite hard to remind people to take a break, etc. But it's all within the realms of what is practical and possible at times. Nobody feels like taking a holiday when they can't go much further than the front door. So it has introduced a lot of interesting stresses into the system.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting observation, and I think there's two sides to that. Is that there's the side where people are working longer than they would normally because they're at home and it's hard to switch off, and I think that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But I also think that people are working harder because they have less, stress of, as you mentioned earlier, arranging childcare, getting to work every day, getting home from work, picking the kids up, and then cooking the dinner, and all of those things, all that they add to your day, and there's less time to do those things, which arguably the things that people really like doing. Not saying that people don't like going to work, but the family life is important to people. And even if you're not a family person, you might have your own hobbies and friends and things like that. So, those things. And if you've got more time to do your job, I believe, and you're able to complete your work, it actually allows you to switch off better in the evening. Even if it is for less time, you actually have that downtime because you know that you've completed your work. So there's two sides to that, I believe, but I do think that it's a strange outcome of home working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you're right. It's a good insight.
So what initiatives have you implemented then to support your people and culture? Tell us about Big Week
Yeah,
Live.
so I mean, it's a good question. We I'd like to say that we got it all right, but we definitely didn't. Like we had a lot of like thoughts around wellness, and we've tried to encourage people to take breaks, but like as I said before, like it's been a busy period and we haven't got it all right. But I think what we have got right is that we've maintained the rhythm and the momentum of the way we work. We have a company-wide stand-up. We're now like nearly 50 full-time people in the business, and we still do it every Wednesday for an hour. Everybody gets together. It's really an opportunity to just like share your highlights and your lowlights. And then we've maintained that through the whole time of COVID. But we've introduced some other initiatives. Like so through COVID, we introduced what we call Library Week. So the first week of every month, we encourage everybody to cancel all internal meetings. So that's an opportunity to try and just get people to kind of clear the decks, kind of do more thoughtful work, slower paced work, the kind of stuff that you need more time, uninterrupted time to think about what you're doing. So that was an initiative that we introduced. So Library Week. And then we normally, as a remote business, have a big get together every year where we bring everybody to a location, normally to Cape Town, actually. But what we did is this year, obviously, we couldn't get everybody together. So we hosted Big Week in the virtual realm. And we knew Zoom wasn't going to be sufficient. I mean, we used Zoom, but like Zoom with people for a whole week is probably like no, yeah, it's a terrible thought.
Yeah.
So what we did is we actually we rented a virtual room in one of these virtual reality worlds. The platform we used was a platform called Verbella, and we decorated it Libryo style. We created work rooms for each of the different teams. We had a big conference venue there, and everybody had to create their own avatar. And so we hosted half of the Big Week. We hosted in this virtual reality world, and it was fascinating because people really got into it. In the beginning, people were a bit like, I'm not sure what to do. And some people aren't really into games and they don't really understand all that. But by the end of the week, the vibe was amazing because we had like a dance session where you took your avatar and you went to a dance party, and you could go explore the island and kind of sail a boat with some of your colleagues, or go walking, play football. There were all these like virtual reality things you could do. And it actually created such a vibe. So by the end of the week, like we actually had a real Big Week feel again, which was amazing because we were desperate not to lose the benefits of a Big Week, but COVID meant we couldn't get everybody together. So I guess that was a
It's
bit
amazing. So this is a literally a virtual world, and people have created their own characters, and then they dive into this world and they interact like they would, in any other sort of social corporate event or whatever. You've got events going on there. Is it all just a fun, or are you doing sort of work pieces in there as well?
No, definitely doing work pieces as well. So, I mean, there was a full conference venue, and so we would host the session like a normal conference. Everybody comes into a big conference hall, everybody sits down.
Yeah.
The presentation would go up on the wall, and so then your screen, you'd now see the presentation that was being presented. So like of the formal presentations, we did all the formal presentations in the virtual reality world as well. So people sitting down at their tables. Like it's very, like it's not like the real world, but it's like a pretty decent mimic of it. And then
are they wearing headphones? Are they wearing headsets like when they're in this world, or is it watching their computer and
yeah, so pretty much like you and I sitting chatting now, except like the screen that you would see would be like you'd be able to see the avatars of other people. You'd be looking at the screen, and you can move around. Like the navigation was pretty good. And the interesting thing was that if you wore headphones, it was proximity sound. So if somebody walked up to you from this side, you'd hear them walking towards you and asking you a question in your right ear. And if they walked from the left-hand side, and so you'd hear proximity sound. It's very cleverly done. I must say that, like, if this is like an early example of where we're heading, like we're not far away from being able to do proper virtual reality engagements with each other. It's, I mean, wow. I mean, it was an amazing experience.
What a fantastic idea, and a unique idea for a global workforce. Because I'm assuming you've got different time zones, and you know, and
Exactly,
yeah, exactly. So it's not always easy or cheap for that matter, or sustainable to just fly people all over the world, you know, for a couple of days to watch a presentation that they could, you know, interact with, you know, online anyway. So yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, there's lots of benefits to meeting in person and you know, building team rapport, and there's still a place for that, and I think always will be. But you know, maybe you can do it more times a year, right? And these sorts of events. So it sounds fantastic, and what a really cool idea. I've never heard anyone doing that. So yeah, I should check it out in more detail. So Malcolm, with lockdowns starting to ease and you know, vaccines are playing catch up, and you know, has your business plan changed, you know, for the future, or what trends are you seeing? What's going on?
It's actually interesting. I mean, we work with quite a broad global customer base, and I definitely think the hybrid world is a reality. I think it's unlikely that we will see people returning to office in the same way that they were pre-COVID. I think the genie's out the bottle, for good and for bad reasons, actually. But and so I think that the ability to meet up, the ability to sell, the ability to market has changed radically as well. So a business like ours, which is a global business, in many ways is in a good position. I think we can benefit from access to customers now. You know, previously, pre-COVID, like if you wanted to do some selling in the US or Australia, you know, you would need to go and like create social rapport with that person and travel and that.
Yeah.
And they would be very reluctant to do a Zoom call. Whereas now, like that's just accepted and expected. And so I think that in some ways the world has shrunk even further and access has improved. From our business perspective, we are definitely seeing the markets opening up incrementally. Like our customers, because we've got such a broad spectrum of customers across the economy, we definitely saw some customers take real pain, you know, particularly on the sort of retail end. We don't really have true hospitality, but we've got a lot of retail customers. And then, interestingly enough, on the other side, on the production end, like mining and heavy chemicals and that kind of stuff, those businesses just kept going. I mean, they obviously in hard lockdown were shut down, but their businesses seem to do a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. And so I think we've seen opportunities there. And COVID has accelerated people's thinking around, I think, people safety through the hygiene lens. And as a result, we've also seen like I think an emerging, and I think this might be more like a psychological thing, but I think people are realizing that if you think about why COVID came about, it's due to human pressure on the planet. And so I think there's actually been there's a greater awareness of environmental pressure. So that really plays well into our space as a sustainability kind of governance platform, providing law to our customers. So we're definitely seeing that happening. And then just the role of technology. I think we've seen a massive acceleration. I think COVID has accelerated platform technology where people are going, we just need to move to the digital world. We just need to move to the cloud. We just need to make sure that we've got a single platform of reference. So I think all of those have actually kind of created a very fertile ground for SaaS businesses, legal technology businesses, etc. And I think we're playing well into that space at the moment. So yeah excited, but not easy, but exciting opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a result of that, how have you helped your customers? You know, what are they demanding most from you right now?
So, I mean, I guess there are two kind of key things that have happened. One was, as we went into COVID, we provided a free COVID tracking solution to customers across quite a number of markets. I can't remember how many markets now, but I think it was like about 20 or 30 markets.
Okay.
And so there, basically, you could just sign up to get COVID updates. So, I mean, we've seen so much regulatory changes as a result of COVID. And so we offered that for about 9 or 10 months. And it was immense pressure for our business because it became like much more overwhelming than we expected it to become, just from a pure regulatory pressure perspective. But we did that for free. We just saw that as an opportunity to see what we could do to help the world, because we all forget now in like April 2021, but in March, April last year, like nobody knew what this was going to be like. Like we were dealing with huge uncertainty. So, you know, we made a lot of tough business decisions, but we also at the time wanted to be a true global citizen and see what we could do to help. So that was, what we called the Libryo COVID tracker was a solution. We sunsetted it in December already. And then what we saw was, because of the demand for regulatory updates, but also the ability to know whether you've complied, we saw the opportunity to launch a new module. And so we've brought a new module to the Libryo platform called Assess, which allows our customers to assess their compliance against the regulatory content that we provide them.
Right. Okay.
We're seeing quite nice early demand for that as well. And that's really a means of like helping customers know what laws they need to comply with, do what they need to do to comply with it, and now show that they've complied with it. So assess themselves against the law, against that regulatory requirement set. So yeah, we brought that to market, and it was recently released. So I think we're quite excited about how that will sort of, in a sense, close the circle in the sort of compliance space that we operate in.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, and you've grown quite a bit over the last 12 months, haven't you, as well? So, you know, from last time I looked, around about sort of 20+%. So what's ultimately driving that growth?
Yeah. So I mean, into the early stage of COVID, we took some quite hard decisions. I mean, we cut salaries and we froze staff hiring, etc., until we saw what was happening economically.
Yeah.
We had a few sort of customers that hit the wobbles during that, but mostly we retained the majority of our customers through that. But what's really driving it is that post October, we kind of like got more confidence in terms of where the economy was going, and we started up recruiting again. And we've got some very significant sort of ambitious targets which we're chasing. And we're a knowledge-based business, so ultimately it's people first, and then you know, ultimately we bring the kind of customers on. So yeah, we've seen decent revenue growth, but importantly, we've invested hard in quite a heavy way into our technology, which means that we've brought on more people. And in actual fact, in the last since October, we've added nearly 20 people to the business. So you know, we've done nearly 50% growth into
this. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's huge numbers, and you know, it's obviously a hot topic at the moment, and rightly so. Being an international business, global business, what does diversity look like? Does that make it easier for you to recruit diversely within your business? And if so, you know, is that important to you?
Look, I think diversity is that. Well, let me take a step back. In the investment world, they say the single most important characteristic you can have in your portfolio is diversification.
Right.
And they call it the free lunch. And I think it's true for business. I think diversity is actually the free lunch of corporate culture. The more diverse you make your business, the better you make your business, the more resilient you make your business, the broader the perspectives you can include into your business. So being able to recruit internationally, I think, does add a lot of diversity. You know, being South Africans, we come out of a damaged past where we've obviously experienced a lot of like racial inequality and as a result, economic inequality. And so we are probably relatively sensitized around diversity, but often through the race lens. But what we're really sort of seeing with the opportunity to recruit globally is that not only are we able to attract people from different like race groups, you know, a really well-diversified gender kind of team, but we're also bringing different perspectives, you know, cultural perspectives, you know, people that speak Spanish and Portuguese, and you know, Americans that are from the East Coast or the West Coast, and you know, people from Malaysia. So like we're starting to bring a whole lot of different talent into the fold. And I mentioned earlier our company stand-ups. I mean, that is like, I know for Pete, Garth, and myself, like it's the single most important and most fun moment of the week, because we see our whole team. And you know, I guess as people who have started a business, you look at this team of amazing people from so many different walks of life, and like that is the strength of our business. It's really our people. Yeah. And so I'm a big believer in diversity. It's not always easy because we've all got our own biases, and you know, sometimes you're prone to kind of reflexing into your kind of like historic biases about how you see things. But an increasingly diverse team keeps that in check as well, because it keeps challenging you, and that's like the great thing about a diverse business.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it seems so obvious, doesn't it, when when you talk about it that way, and it just seems crazy that it isn't adopted more widely, and hopefully, again, one of the positives that might come out of this sort of COVID situation is that it's given people more confidence to look further afield and not just within that 10-mile radius of your office, and actually allow you to recruit the best talent regardless of where they are or who they are, and and hopefully that will expand, and I just see that as a positive really for organizations. And it's certainly if in our mindset now is that typically within recruitment you would you want someone who comes into the office. It's a sort of sales environment, and you want people to sort of bounce off each other in the office. But we've completely changed our mindset, so it's allowed us to look further afield, and look for the best talent wherever that person is, and whoever that person is, rather than just someone who can get to the office on a Monday to Friday. So
Absolutely.
yeah, fantastic. And you talked about awareness there, and people, biases and things like that. And it's fantastic to hear people, especially leaders, talk about that awareness of and being open to being challenged about in those areas. But what have you learned most about yourself and your business over the last 12 months?
Phew. So,
Big question.
so I mean, people that know me always laugh when I say this, but I guess at a personal level, I realize that I'm an introvert.
Okay.
And that is like really weird because I'm quite a loud, big personality. But actually, I loved lockdown. I mean, I was as happy as as happy as Larry, because the reality is that I actually enjoy just like being by myself. That's where I actually get my energy from. So my wife and I had lots of like intriguing conversations around that. So I guess that's probably the single most important thing I learned about myself, because it was a real insight. I always thought I was an extrovert. Um, in terms of our business, sure. I mean, there's been so many insights that we've kind of gained over this period, but I think probably most importantly is that, like, in a knowledge working business, and I made a point about this earlier, is that it's always people first. Like, you have to, like, your business is only as good as your people. I mean, like, maybe like put this another way, like in an old style business, you raise capital, you buy some equipment, you build a plant, you get some raw materials in, and you produce a widget out the other end. Your balance sheet reflects the plant that you've built. In our business, like, everything we build is in the virtual world. Like, the only hardware we have are the laptops, that we buy for our staff. Outside of that, everything is in the virtual world. And so you suddenly realize that the most valuable asset, and I don't say this in a derogatory way, but the most valuable asset you have is your people. And it's a bit glib to say that, but it is just so true. And I think COVID has just highlighted that for me, that, our people are our business. And so it's like, we call ourselves a customer first business, but actually we're a people first business, because whether it's about your staff or about your customers, they're all people that are going through real lived experiences. And that's what matters. So empathy for our customers, and as much empathy as possible for our staff. And that means that you can actually deliver solutions, whether it be customer oriented solutions or a business environment that is suitable for your people. But it's not easy, and you make mistakes all the time.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, because yeah, again, another benefit from COVID is that it's made people value human interaction and people more, right? We live in a society where if someone goes quiet, for a couple of weeks at the minute, before vaccines and that, but if people went quiet for a couple of weeks, you start worrying about them, right? And thinking, actually, are they safe? Whereas before, in a busy world where everyone's going about their daily lives, you could easily not speak to someone for 3-4 weeks, months even, so I think it's really driven that human interaction, and it's interesting that you've sort of badge yourself as an introvert, but yet you're still focused on people, and I share that value with you. I'm the same. I've worked out that actually I quite like that sort of headspace and time. I get my energy from being alone, and then but it gives me more energy when I see people to really value that interaction as well. So I do share that with you as well. So yeah, really interesting. And I always like asking that question, because every business leader, is having their own unique challenges, and but also lots of similar challenges as well. And it's always interesting to see how people reflect on their businesses. So thanks for sharing that. A couple of quick fire questions then, and I always ask these questions at the end of the podcast. And this is really for people that are listening, that maybe interested to know more about your company, your leadership style, and maybe interested in joining your business when suitable roles come up. So what does leadership mean to you?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of like having vision and be able to kind of sketch a vision for people, and then step away and kind of work from behind. Like, we've got a strong culture of servant leadership. I don't think we aspire for that sort of like world where there's like the leader and then the rest of us. Like, we're a collaborative group. We think that everybody has a leadership role to play at different times in a business. It might be that in one particular moment, like Milk is like the guy who can do this, but at another time it's Pete or Garth or Michelle or Sam or Beth or James or whoever it might be. So I think the reality is that leadership is contextual, and it's at a point in time, and mostly the roles of leaders is to kind of inspire and empower and give people the confidence and the ability to do what they need to do, and then set them free to do that. My personal belief is that, like, try not to micromanage. Give people good direction, but then step back. And I think good leadership knows how to do that, knows when to step back and when to intervene. And if we can build a business that's got an embedded culture of kind of servant leadership around it, then I think we build a business that is, driven from the bottom up rather than controlled from the top down. So yeah, I guess that would be how I would like to think of leadership and the way we approach.
Yeah, I think it's often forgotten. Leaders often get caught up in feeling they have to be leading all the time and dragging the business forward. And but you see it, that when they stop leading, the business stops moving. So for me, that's not a business. A business is it's the sum of all of its parts, right? And you need people to be able to carry that forward. And you've talked about it earlier, those taking those different perspectives and different ideas from different cultures and global locations and things like that. So it sounds like you're in the right place. And then finally, Malcolm, it's been a really fantastic conversation. So thank you. But what piece of advice would you give your peers, navigating this period? What we're coming out of lockdown. Is it a case of get back to normal, or do you think that a new approach is needed?
Sure. I'm always hesitant to kind of like be in a position where I give that advice, but I guess like there's not too many times in your life that you get the opportunity to reset and rethink.
Yeah.
It's even less frequent that you get it as a community or as a society, but we've weirdly been given this like very unique moment. And so I would say, like, rather than rushing back to try and get back to normal, like, rather ask the question, like, how would I rather go back? Like, what would I do differently? And how would I as a person reshape the way I do things? And how could we as a business reshape the way we do things? Because, as wonderful as the previous world was, it wasn't always that wonderful, and it had lots of flaws in it. And like, we've all had a bit of a chance to think and reflect and all go through some quite difficult challenges in our own personal context, or our communities, or our businesses. So, like, use this as an opportunity to go back to something new rather than back to something normal. So find that new normal if it's possible. And I don't really love the phrase new normal, but find that new thing, that adjusted perspective, the way of being a little bit different. And like, think about how you can, in a weird way, walk more lightly in your business and on the world, because like like nobody can deny the benefits of a quieter world and what we've seen happening around us in the natural world. Like, I think that's true for everyone. Like, a little bit more lightly might mean a lot more lightness for all of us. Actually, we could actually kind of have a better world by just being a bit more lighter about the way we approach things.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, really. Yeah, I really like that. So if you're listening to this and you're interested to find out more, please go and check out Libryo and their website. Keep an eye on what they're doing, and roles that they might be recruiting for. And I'm sure Malcolm wouldn't mind you reaching out to him if you're interested, just to find out what it means to work there. So Malcolm, fantastic conversation. I really, really do appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks for all the work you're doing. I think you've done a great job, and I mean, I think this is a great initiative that you started during lockdown, which really kind of like demonstrates, such an important part of business, which is, I think, historically we've spoken a lot about it, but not really acted on it, and I think you brought that to bear. So well done for what you're doing, and thanks for all your support to the legal tech community. It's really appreciated.
Thank you very much.